I leave it down? Okay. My presentation is going to be a little different from that of Solly's. Roy, can you just do that? You see, can't you?
The master.
I just have to talk loudly. Okay, that's fine. All right. It's first of all, good evening. It's an honor for me to be part of this panel and share my thoughts with you. Several friends and acquaintances saw my name as one of the panelists, and they asked me why I was presenting, because I'm not a second-generation child of Holocaust survivors. My perceptions are personal, and my place on the panel is representing those whom I have defined, my own definition, as the second generation once removed. That is, whose parents are not Holocaust survivors, as they emigrated to another land, in our case South Africa, but left behind large extended families. Brothers and sisters, aunts, uncles, and cousins who were murdered in the Shoah. We too grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust. Recently, I mentioned that I was speaking at this panel to an acquaintance and explained my perception of my role on the panel.
Then just put it closer, yeah.
She gasped and said, "That sounds just like my father. We too lived in the shadow of the Holocaust. And as I enter into conversation with people about the subject, there seem to be many of us whose parents endured pain and loss relating to the Holocaust, but are not survivors. My father left Lithuania in 1929 to join his brother A.B., who emigrated to South Africa in 1924. Sorry, this is my perceptions. No, not yet, Roy. Growing up in Cape Town, we did not speak of the Holocaust. And if we did, it was once a year, prior to Yom HaShoah, the Sunday when the ceremony was held at the Pioneer Cemetery. We also held a cemetery for Holocaust Day at Herzliya School. And we spoke about the Holocaust in our youth movement. But if I recall correctly, the dialogue centered around the leaders of uprising and the heroes of the Holocaust. I knew the names of few Holocaust survivors in Cape Town. Dr. Kaplinsky, I knew was Mr. Kaplinsky. Mr. Breslin, Cantor and Mrs. Lichterman, and Dr. and Mrs. Herzl when they came to South Africa from Israel and were involved in the Claremont congregation at Herzliya School. When my friend, Gwen Schreier, sorry, I should have done this before, presented me with her book, In Sacred Memory, where she interviews Holocaust survivors in Cape Town, I looked through the book and was amazed to see the name of Mrs. Glaser, a Holocaust survivor. I was at school with Batya Glaser, her daughter, and believe me, I did not know that either of her parents were Holocaust survivors. I am sure there were many more, and that relates to exactly what Solly just said. Gwen Schreier writes the following in this book, that following liberation, when displaced persons were seeking refuge all over the world, admission into South Africa proved difficult. Between the years 1946 and 1948, 1,512 Jews entered South Africa. Among them, there were about 300 Holocaust survivors. A number of these survivors were allowed into South Africa for family reunification, as Eileen mentioned, and or because they had specific skills, like cantors. Now, as many of South African Jews have their roots in Lithuania, I'll give you a brief history of the Holocaust in Lithuania. On the 23rd of March 1939, Germany was annexed and the port city of Klaipėda in Lithuania. On the 23rd of August 1939, Hitler and Stalin signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty, a non-aggression pact. On the 15th of June 1940, the Soviet army took control of Lithuania, and after that it was officially annexed. And in early August, the Provisional Lithuanian government was replaced by Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic, LSSR. On the 20th of June 1941, Operation Barbarossa, an attack by Nazi Germany on the Soviet Union, set the Holocaust in Lithuania into motion. Operation Barbarossa was the code name for this attack. From mid-August to November 1941, about 80% of Lithuanian Jewry was exterminated, mostly in the small towns and shtetls, Records were sometimes kept of the numbers of people murdered, but unfortunately, many of the names not. Here is an example I'm going to read to you from this book called Documents Accused of the systematic murder of the Jews in the small towns and shtetls. One moment, please. Okay. General survey on all executions carried out in the sphere of action of Einsatzkommando 3 up to December the 1st, 1941. Einsatzkommando 3 took over its duties as security police in Lithuania on the 2nd of July, 1941. I'll just read some of the numbers of the people that were murdered. July the 7th, Mariampol, 32 Jews. July 9th, 1941, Kaunas 7th Fort, 21 Jews and 3 Jewesses. I'll just read you a few more. 21st of July 1921, Ponevezh, as you all know it, 59 Jews and 11 Jewesses. And the last one is August the 20, on this page, August the 23rd, Ponevezh, 1,312 Jews, 4,602 Jewesses, and 1,609 Jewish children, which makes 7,523. And that was the murder of the Jews in the provinces of Lithuania. By the end of 1941, only 43,000 of the 220,000 to the 225,000 Jews who were in Lithuania at the start of the German occupation remained alive. They were living in 4 ghettos: Vilnius, Kaunas, Shavli, or Shaule, and Svension. Svensiona's ghetto was liquidated quite soon after it was established, and only 3 ghettos remained. The Jews worked as slave laborers. Those unfit to work were murdered. This included children and the elderly. Some Jews were deported to Latvia to work as slave laborers there. In 1944, the ghettos of Lithuania were liquidated. The Jews who survived to this point were transported to the Stutthof concentration camp. From there, they were dispersed. Well, first of all, some of the women remained in Stutthof to work, where they worked in places like Bayer and Siemens and all those other familiar names to us. And others were transported to Auschwitz, Dachau, Buchenwald, Mauthausen, Dora, Mattelbau, and some to Treblinka. Mothers and young children were sent to Auschwitz and murdered there upon arrival. 94% of the Jews of Lithuania were murdered in the Holocaust of Lithuania. Now to the Holocaust histories of my family. The murders in Užventis, my father's ancestral town, were carried out by Einsatzgruppen 3 and their Lithuanian helpers on the 30th of July and the 8th of December 1941. My father's parents, Reza Nitzvik and Benjamin Lerer, my grandparents, were murdered in the Pashilva forest on July the 30th, 1941. My father's brother Hurst Zvi, sometimes known as Berylist, studied in the yeshiva in Kernweh and was murdered in the Pashilva forest together with his parents. My father's sister Tzila Lerer was married to Yechiel Orshvam. Yechiel and Tzila had 5 children, all of whom were murdered in the Shoah. Tzila was in hiding for 6 months together with her children. She was found and taken to the forest and murdered with other Jews on the 8th of December 1941. Another sister, Malka, wanted to make Aliyah before the war and did not and remained in Lithuania. She was incarcerated in the Shavli ghetto together with her husband Nachum Fink and their daughter Miriam, born on the 5th of June 1941, 17 days before Operation Barbarossa. I have no knowledge of where they perished. Of the 99 Jews who lived in Užvent on the eve of the outbreak of the Shoah, I only know of 4 or 5 who survived, and 2 or 3 of them weren't even in Užventis. They were in Shaule when the Jews were rounded up. Okay. This is a list of Jews who were murdered in Užventis that was given to me by a woman by the name of Miriam Yavne, a survivor who has passed on, and I donated the list to Yad Vashem. Where the one blue arrow is, we see Lerer, my grandfather and my father's brother, and the other arrow is my grandmother, Reza Lerer, and on the 3rd page we see my aunt, Auntie Tzila, and her 5 children. Okay, the next one. This is a photograph of the mass grave in Pashilva Forest. On the photograph you'll see that there are two monuments, an old one and a new one. The old one was put up by the Russians and it's remained, and since then the sign has changed from only Russian to also having some Lithuanian on it, and the black tombstone is the one that the families of the children who are from Juventus erected. And as you see, the two of them stand together. Okay, the next one. In 1955, the larger communal grave in the Pashilva forest was pilfered by residents of the town, hoping to find gold and silver. In that same year, the remains of those victims were moved to the cemetery in Vilnius, where they were buried in the mass grave. The picture on the side is 1955. Rachel Katsav, she was one of the survivors who was instrumental in helping to move the remains to Vilna. And that's my son actually last year, 2016, lighting a candle at the mass grave. Now to my mother's family. My mother's family was in South Africa by 1931. My grandfather, no, just I'll keep it there. Just go back, please. Thank you. In 1931, my grandfather emigrated in 1924, and my grandmother arrived with 7 children in 1931. They left behind very close relatives in Lithuania. My mother used to tell me about her first cousins who were raped and murdered in the forest in Plunyan, and then shot. The story shocked me, and I just couldn't believe it. And as a researcher, I decided I had to find proof. Several years ago, I met the Levitts, whose ancestral town is Plunyan, and who are very well acquainted with the town's history. And I asked, have you heard the story of the young girls who were murdered and who were raped and murdered and also made to convert as well? Glenda said, of course. I have a list of the names. Here's the list, and here are the names and here you see the names of my mother's cousins. We have Kessel Tzipora and Kessel Mira, and at the little picture at the side is of Tzipora Kessel with her friend Hannah Nyman, whose name also appears on the list. Okay.
Who did this?
Afterwards we'll have questions. Now, this is my father's tombstone. My father never spoke of the Holocaust. Okay? The picture that you see over here is the picture that was on our sideboard in the breakfast room in Cape Town, and every night we ate our meals with these pictures and a few others. My father never spoke of his family that was murdered in the Holocaust, and we never asked. His guilt for not being able to save them and the immense feeling of loss was profound. All the information that I've shared with you this evening is the result of 26 years of research, which began after my father passed away. Today, as a parent, grandmother, and aunt, I feel his pain. Although my parents are not Holocaust survivors, the Holocaust is part of my being. I visit there about 25 times. I go almost every year. My research focuses on the Holocaust in Lithuania. I've published articles, and I also wrote this book together with my friend Saul Isroff, it holds lists of Jews who were murdered in the Shoah in Lithuania. It was done many years ago, and the names today are on the website of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and of Yad Vashem. Here, this is what the books look like. I'm ending my talk with a poem written by our son Ari during our visit to Lithuania in 2016 for the commemoration of 75 years of the murder of the Jews of Uzmetis. He wrote this at Ponar, and he was so moved by whatever he saw there, because you see the pits and it's just very difficult to bear. The Holocaust has permeated the third generation, even though we are not direct descendants of Holocaust survivors. I'll read the poem first in Hebrew, and then I'll read it in English. And this is what he wrote. בתוך בורות של זיכרון, הדמעות צפות והגרון חנוק, תחושה של מראה של ניצחון, יחד עם תחושה של הפסד ואיפוק. חלום בלהות שנראה כה אמיתי, הרגש חי ובועט, רואה את הקבר בבטן הוא אינו, המוות בתוכו צועק, העבר הנורא יצר עתיד מוזר, עירוב של שמחה ועצב, לפעמים הוא מוכר, לרוב הוא זר, הצחוק והבכי קובעים את הקצב. And I'll read the translation. Within the pits of memory, Tears surge forth, the throat is choked, a bitter sense of triumph, along with a feeling of loss and restraint, a nightmare that seems so real, emotions abound, see the pit, the gut cannot grasp. Death shouts out. The unfathomable past creates a bizarre future, mingling joy and sadness, occasionally familiar, mostly foreign. Laughter and tears set the pace.